Well, good morning again, everyone. It is VBS week, and I don't know how much you know about VBS. Yes, thank you. I don't know how much you know about VBS or don't know about VBS. It depends on when you grew up. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. But VBS is amazing. I absolutely love VBS. I always have. It's just one of those things. It's been a part of my life, literally at this point, as long as I can remember. I don't remember a time in my life where there wasn't VBS of some sort going on around me. And so my prayer is that hopefully all of you are able to participate in this week in some way. Now, I know many of you are volunteering, serving, loving on the kids this week, and that is a great, great way to do it. We also know that's not feasible for everyone, but there's a lot of other ways you can participate, from the financial side of things to donations that were needed for VBS. And obviously, the greatest thing that we all should be doing is praying for this week of VBS that is up ahead of us. I don't know if you've thought about that, but please, please, please keep the volunteers, keep the workers, the families of the kids that are coming in, keep them in your prayers throughout this week for lots and lots of reasons. Obviously, first and foremost, for their hearts and souls. That's got to be number one. But right behind that, you know, in this day and age that we live in, obviously, is just everybody's safety involved. And I know the church, the bigger church in Cloverdale where we live, had their VBS this week, and they continued on with it. And I know most other churches have canceled such things. And so absolutely, we're not taking a risk. That's not the right term. We're stepping out on faith is what we're doing. And we've got to consider things that way. So pray about the opportunity we're going to have over these next 4 days to share the love of Jesus with every child that comes in, every mother or father or grandparent or neighbor or coworker that drops their kids off this next week. Adults that are hanging out here, make it an intentional effort to talk with those folks that might be dropping people off. We have gotten registrations after advertising and doing things online and people we don't know. So please make it a point to interact with those parents or guardians or whoever it is that happens to be the ones dropping their kids off over these next few days. All right, do that for me. I will do it as well. I'll be out there with you throughout all of that time, trying to communicate, talk with, meet with those people. Just share with them the love of Jesus, because so many people do not have it. What I want you to remember today is a very simple statement. It's the mission statement of Jesus, if you will. Okay? Now, I don't know where you've grown up or what you do for a living, but how many of you have ever been a part of an organization or a school or a business where you were maybe even part of creating or being subject to the mission statement of that organization? Who's ever had to do that? Okay? Yeah, you've either been a part of the process or a victim of it, depending on how you look at it. Okay? Trust me, I know, I worked at a school. And so you create this flowery language, lovely, beautiful, idealistic statement, and you put it on a plaque, and nobody knows it. Nobody adheres to it. It's just something you had to do to satisfy some requirement that somebody gave you, right? That's exactly all it ended up being. Well, Jesus wasn't that way. Jesus is very practical, very useful. His simple mission statement, as he stated himself in Luke 19:10, was this: "For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Jesus' entire ministry, his entire existence on this planet could be summed up with those very few words. And I want to remind you that that is our primary mission to this very day as a church. All right? Now, I know many of you do, because we just had a conversation as a praise team and things before the service. How many of you remember Vacation Bible School growing up? Raise your hand. How many of you went to Vacation Bible School of some sort growing up as a kid? Nearly every single person in this room. That should tell you something right now. Okay, just think about that for a moment and what impacts that has. Now, I love VBS. I always have. I can remember as a kid, I lived in Evansville, Indiana. I went to a little bitty church called Cullen Avenue Christian Church, a church of less than 200 at that point in time. Now it's called Crossroads Christian Church, and it's a mega church of multiple thousands of people on the east side of Evansville in a town called Newburgh. Same church, okay? But I can remember VBS, and I distinctly remember VBS as a very young kid. I mean, I probably would have been in kindergarten, because I moved in first grade, so I probably would have been in kindergarten when this happened. I remember at the end of the week, you get prizes at VBS. You remember getting prizes at VBS? I got a prize, a very special prize at VBS. I got a puzzle from my teacher that looked like this. I promise I have a picture of it. No, that's not it yet. Keep going. No, we're not there yet. No, we're not. That's too far. Back the other way. I promise there's a picture. Yeah? It should have been right after that. No. I promise there's a picture of this puzzle that I received. It's in there somewhere. I remember dropping. Oh well, maybe it's not. It was a picture. It was actually a common character. There's a whole series of these characters, but the particular I got was this round little ball thing playing the drum, and at the top of the puzzle it said Mr. Noisy. I have no idea what that meant. I don't know what that teacher was trying to tell me. I don't have any clue who my teacher was, but I would love for that teacher to find out what it is I'm doing for a living these days. Just love to share that with her if I could find her, because I think maybe I didn't get along real well with her or something. Because I don't know, maybe I got in trouble for talking. It's possible. It is very possible that happened. But beyond that, I can remember things happening as a kid growing up. We went to church in Putnam County, and my mom was co-director of our week of VBS. She had a best friend that directed VBS with her for years. Some of you know her. Her name was Karina Stewart, because she also worked right over here at First Christian Church for a number of years as well. Marvelous, wonderful lady, great friends with her family. My mom's still great friends with her today, even though she lives in North Carolina. But they did all kinds of things for VBS. I remember them distinctly dressing up like clowns for VBS. Yes, if you know my mom, that is as out of character as it could ever be for her to do that. And so you can ask her, hey, when was the last time you dressed up like a clown? Just see what she says. She doesn't know what's in this message. So you just ask. She's in the nursery right now, in case you wondered. So ask her what was going on. I can remember, and I clarified with her, I told you a long time ago, and I'll remind you today, I do not make up stories. The stories I tell you are as absolutely true as they possibly can be, and I try to verify them if I can. We had a blue Reliant K station wagon car. Okay, blue Reliant K station wagon car in the late 80s, and it's a 5-seater. And I absolutely remember us being at least 10 of us in that car, because 4 or 5 of us would sit in the trunk. That did not have seats or seat belts or rules, airbags. Nah, we don't care. Throw in as many as you possibly can. And I counted with Mom this last week. Okay, I know this. Yep, she's right. And I said, I think my sister had some friends in there too. So we really think there was probably more like 12, but I'll go with the 10 number to not exaggerate. Absolutely, every day it was awesome to get all those people to go to VBS with us. Do you remember as a kid growing up, maybe your VBS did this, depending on your church. Do you remember those yellow coolers we would borrow from McDonald's and drink that weird orange drink that you've never had anywhere else? But it doesn't exist anymore, people. Sorry, you can be jealous. But we have that at VBS. These are the things that I remember from Vacation Bible School. I don't remember having that stuff anywhere else. I think maybe at school events sometimes we would have those things as well. As we got older, I aged out of obviously a VBS class, and so I began helping Mom in the 2s and 3s class with VBS, which was always a blast. But then a little bit later on in life, after Kristen and I got married, she and her mom became the directors of the VBS at the little church that we grew up in. And so I got to participate that. Some great friends of mine were a part of that as well as students from our youth ministry that we were volunteers of there. And so we got to do some crazy, crazy things then. Our main thing was the interaction with the kids at the beginning and into the night. And so we would make some just crazy videos, sometimes loosely pertaining to the lessons of the week, and I do mean loosely pertaining. I can remember us doing interesting things like wrestling alligators in the choir loft. I remember us telling the story, I think it was like this, the story of Elijah and Mount Carmel, the prophets of Baal, and something about calling down fire from heaven to burn your microwave popcorn. I remember a good friend of mine named Boyd Pickle had sheep. And so the year that Jesus, they were telling the story of the lost sheep, so we had my good friend Brandon Jones dress up like Jesus. We went out to Boyd Pickle's farm, and we found the sheep. I mean, this was what we did. This was fun. It was great with the kids, great interaction. Who knew that a few years later, my wife would be the children's minister at our church, and I would be the youth minister, and I would still get to make fun videos for the kids. It was great. It was so much fun to be a part of those people's lives. Crazy videos. I remember the awful Australian accents we used whenever we were. This was back in the Crocodile Hunter days. So those of you that remember him, Steve Irwin, yes, that's what we were watching back then in the 90s. And so it was great. It was great. Here's the thing. So many kids through those weeks of VBS, over now more than a century of VBSs, have gotten to hear about Jesus. Some of them, and you would not believe the number, for the very first time. And so many stories from God's Word are shared with these kids that they would never, ever, ever, ever have heard anywhere else than by you volunteering at VBS. This was the greatest investment that our ministries would make in the outreach world throughout the entire year at our church. And there was always some immediate fruit that developed. I asked Kristen to give me a couple stories from her time as a children's minister. And next year, well, actually, at the end of this week, I'll begin asking McKenna for stories from her and what she experienced throughout this week to use for future years. But every year, one of our biggest nights of offerings for our mission was Penny Night, the dreaded Penny Night, when you have more than 200 kids bringing in all of their offering that they went to the bank to get pennies for. It was awful, wonderful. It was awfully wonderful. And so we would have an incredible, huge crew of people together to count all these pennies. And sometimes it would take to the very last second of the end of the program, to the end of the night, before we could get a total of all of those pennies. No, we could not use the change counting machine from the bank. They wouldn't let us borrow it. All right, so we asked, all right? Anyway, and so there was one particular year, Chris, remember, that a father dropped off his son and said, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Oh, it happened to be Penny Night. Yes, absolutely, there's something you can do. So he stayed and he helped count pennies, and Kristen sat down and talked with him while I was doing that. Found out he was going through a pretty traumatic time. He was going through divorce at the time. And just got to share with him just a little bit about the church and who we were and things like that. Well, wouldn't you know, he showed back up the next night, volunteered to help out. Wouldn't you know that he and his son began going to church there and eventually joined the church, and every year that we were there, this gentleman helped out with VBS, and his son came to VBS with them. Why? Because of Penny Night. The most dreaded night of the most wonderful night of the entire week of VBS. Another story she shared with me is a little more personal. It was the summer of 2011. And exactly 1 week before VBS, my wife's husband decided to go to the doctor and get diagnosed with stage 3 kidney disease. Basically a life sentence then to ultimately have to get a transplant at some point in time. Well, that happened in 2017. That was 1 week before VBS. Well, any of you that have been in charge of VBS know the week of VBS is stressful. It's difficult. It's challenging. It's emotional. And so 1 week before that, when your husband's diagnosed with that, you don't want to do VBS. You don't want to do VBS at all. I don't blame her. I don't blame her in the least. She's already emotionally completely worn out. But the show must go on, as they say. And so God, in his infinite wisdom, decided to wait till all the way, the very first night, as kids were coming in, to remind her of why you're doing this. And she had a little girl come in. Miss Kristen, I missed you. No big deal, right? That happens all the time at church. But this wasn't a girl that went to our church. This was a girl that was VBS last year. Doesn't go to church anywhere. She remembered her name. Couldn't wait to get back that next year. That's the impact you have. Unintentionally, completely unintentionally. Didn't know that little girl from anyone else. But immediately God reminded you exactly why it is that you're here, why it is you're doing what you're doing. God had a plan for that year as well. Now, as a youth minister, I got to hang out with the junior high students throughout the year at VBS. This is multiple. We've done all kinds of crazy things, but one of our favorite things to do was we met in this room, literally this room, just at another location. Goodman Church buildings build these buildings all over the country. Sorry, your sanctuary is not unique in any way. It's the exact same wood. Everything about it is the exact same. And we had the exact same one. We still had pews, though. And our favorite thing to do was play volleyball. And we put the flags across, and we played volleyball in the sanctuary. And so that was one of the fun things that we did. We did lots of other things, just dance parties, all kinds of fun things in that room. It was incredible, and it was life-changing. But the best part of this was we had so many students that would come randomly from wherever to VBS to be part of our junior high ministry then, and then continue on throughout the youth group year. And one of my favorites, and literally I can show you right now if you want to see a picture. He was texting me yesterday because he was at Cedar Point. I'll get to that here in a minute. One of my favorite kids ever came to us at VBS as a sixth grader. Now, Matthew was a bigger kid for his age. I'll just leave it at that. But he was super nice and lovable, kind of shy to start off with. But as the week went on and we got to know him, man, was he great. By the end of the week, he actually earned a nickname, Peachy. Now, you might think that's an odd nickname until you learn his last name is Peach. And then you're like, okay, Chris, you're not that creative. Yes, you're right. All right, so anyway, Peachy went on to become a rock of our student ministry, a student leader. He went on, and I am not exaggerating, everything we ever did, every trip, every concert, every theme park, every service trip, every service project, every mission. Peachy was with us every single time. And you know the best part? Matthew didn't even go to our church. His parents are Southern Gospel through and through and through. And he was there for every single thing we ever did, and we're still great friends to this day. We went to see the new Star Wars together when it came out this last winter. He was over at my house for dinner, and like I said, he was texting me yesterday from Cedar Point. He and I shared the same music, the same love of roller coasters, the same like of food, you name it. He is an amazing, amazing student that I would have never known if it hadn't been for Simple Vacation Bible School. As I mentioned earlier, I love VBS, and I pray that my love and McKenna's love and many of our volunteers' love will overflow to all of you as well, depending on what your current thought about VBS is. So as I was preparing for this week, I thought, it might be fun. I'm curious, where on earth did Vacation Bible School come from? Where did this idea come from? It hasn't always existed. It's not in the Bible. It's not biblical per se. Jesus did not say thou shalt have Vacation Bible School the next week of July or June. It's not in there, okay? So what happened? Where did it come from, all right? In today's culture, although it's an odd moment that we live in, so maybe I can't say this, but the words Vacation Bible School don't sound all that exciting to a lot of people. That connotation of school just kind of has a negative image. You've noticed it's usually just called VBS now, and most people don't know what the V, the B, or the S stand for, right? And there's a reason for that, to get rid of that idea, all right? But here's the thing. There are people, and we battled this at our old church, there are some people that think, well, you know what, VBS might not be the best investment for our resources, might not be the best opportunity for this or for that. They don't believe that those attractional kinds of things are necessarily the way Jesus would like to do it. And I would love to challenge anyone that thinks that with Jesus himself, because Jesus was attractional. People were attracted to Jesus, and not always for good reasons. People were drawn to him because of what he was doing and what he was saying, and they might have been drawn in a positive or a negative way. It happened both ways. He did some pretty sensational things in his ministry, did he not? Things that spread far and wide and drew people to come find out more. And today, the church should be doing those things too. We should be doing things that are attractional, that people talk about far and wide, and people are drawn into the love of Jesus because of these things that are happening here. You see, the truth will actually draw people in ultimately. And of course, we know he is the way, the truth, and the life. What others experience in his love and his generosity through us will draw people into his bride, the church. When others experience the care that we're going to show for their kids and their families over this next week, people will be drawn to Christ as a result. VBS is said to have started in a number of places, so it's actually hard to identify the exact right location. There's two that are pretty certain. It might have started just after the Civil War in Boston, Massachusetts, in the 1870s. It might have started in Canada in the 1870s. That is just as possible. A man named Robert Boville, listen to this, the executive secretary of the New York City Baptist Board of Missions. We just don't have titles like that in church anymore. We need more No, we don't. That's terrible. I don't have any idea. I guess that meant something back then, but it doesn't mean anything to us. Here's his, and I quote, "He had a concern that the children of New York be given religious instruction during their idle summers to keep them out of trouble and develop patterns of productive and upright adult living." Or as another put it, the Vacation Church School was started to gather idle children into unused churches where unoccupied teachers might keep them busy in a wholesome way in a wholesome environment. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? I don't think he would have played volleyball with us in the sanctuary. I'm just saying, I don't think he would have. But I think the two ladies that are actually given credit with starting VBS would have. And so I'll introduce you to them. Back in the late 1890s, there were two Sunday school teachers, one in New York and one in Illinois, who developed the same idea kind of independently. School kids were out for the summer. They needed something to do. Why not invite them to church and study the Bible? Maybe sing a few songs and have some fun along the way. Sounds like my kind of people. Mrs. Hall's story is great. She was a compassionate doctor's wife who sensed the need to get the children off the streets of New York during the summertime. Mrs. Walker Halls went to New York City from Charlottesville, Virginia. Her husband was specializing in a medical clinic, a medical ministry to the children of New York City. She noted that many of the children who attended his clinic were receiving injuries that they received while playing on the streets of New York. So she thought, hey, I've got an idea. Let's find something safe and productive for these kids to occupy their time during the summer. So in 1898 and 1899, she rented a beer hall. Yes, a bar. Yeah, She rented a beer hall on the east side of the city to conduct her everyday Bible school, as it was called. And thus Bible school began with that evangelistic outreach to a community, bringing the gospel to the kids where they were. However, in the year 1900, her pastor, the pastor of Epiphany Baptist Church, which was about a mile away from this beer hall that she had rented, decided, no, we need to move this to the church. It would obviously be better for it to be at the church than at this other place. So after 2 weeks of meeting at the church, it became very clear to Mrs. Hawes that none of the kids would come to the church. So she went back to renting a place near the beer hall, which obviously was already occupied by this point in the summer. The idea was a hit. Continued to grow. The outreach began to reach all the ethnicities all over New York City, from the Chinese, Oriental folks to the Italians to you name it. It was growing like crazy. There were more than 1,500 different students from all different backgrounds. By 1907, that had spread to Philadelphia and to Chicago. By 1922, there were more than 5,000 of these schools around the country. 4 years prior to this, in Little Hopedale, Illinois, a Methodist pastor's wife named D.T. Miles had the same idea. It was called an interdenominational summer Bible school in Hopedale, Illinois. Each child paid $1 to attend, and the American Bible Society provided the scriptures to any child that didn't already own one. In the 1920s, the VBS schedule looked like this behind me. There's actually many of the elements that we have even to this very day. Attendance, some still do memory work. Some still do some drama at different times. There's a game time. They've got recess in there. It was just in the morning. They sang songs. They did all those kinds of things. And VBS continued to grow in the following decades. After about 50 years of this, there were more than 60,000 VBSs now across this country. More than 5 million students attending, even back in the 1950s. But on the 50th anniversary of the first schools in New York, the old Christian magazine called The Christian Century noted that some members, again, listen to this title, of the National Council of Churches Education Board, I don't know, they were dismayed. Why? Because the programs used to be 7 weeks long. Anybody that's helped with VBS knows why I'm laughing. And they were down to just 2 weeks long now. That was a little worrisome for them. And though they seemed to have a lot of popularity, their educational value was of question. A good many such schools leave an impression that of being primarily a sort of supervised recreation center to which mothers anxious to get rid of their youngsters can send them while the morning household tasks are being cleared away. Yes, even back then, some saw kids' activities at church as nothing more than babysitting. It's sad that people think that. Now, VBS was absolutely birthed out of some of the mainline denominations, but us other Protestants caught on pretty quick. In 1960, a man named Charles Treadway said this, and I love what he had to say about VBS then. He said, and I quote, "These things they absolutely did more than just increase biblical literacy. They jump-started everything from church planting to missions. No doubt, many of the missionaries had the fires of missionary passions kindled at Vacation Bible School. Of course, evangelism was the most important thing of all, and this is what he said the best. By this means, entrance may be gained into the homes and the hearts of people within the community. No greater value is afforded by Vacation Bible School than that of winning boys and girls to Christ." That hasn't changed. No greater thing could happen than winning boys and girls to Christ. Today, Vacation Bible School, or VBS, there was a study done in 2018 by Lifeway out of Nashville, Tennessee. And in this study, 6 in 10 Americans say that they went to VBS growing up. 2/3 of American parents say they plan to send their kids to VBS that summer. That was in 2018. Even if they themselves, the family, don't attend church regularly. More than 1/3 of them went to VBS every single summer growing up. Why did people go? Well, there was 2 basic reasons. The first one was either their family went to a church that hosted one, or a member of their family went to a church and then they went with them. The second way, 25%, 1/4 of the people surveyed said they went to VBS simply because someone asked them to go. A friend, an acquaintance, a coworker. And so I ask, who have you asked to come to VBS this next week? Obviously, we know the numbers this year, the numbers aren't what are important. Honestly, for me, they never are. But have we done our work? Have we gone out and asked to see if people might be willing to come. We would love to have them in the junior high class with us if they're of that age. Absolutely. VBS still has a positive image out there. Even today, 70% of parents say they would let their kids go to VBS, even if it's not the church they attend or even if they don't attend church at all. What are we doing with that information? That is encouraging, or it should be to us. How are we using it to reach out to those that don't know Jesus? Because so many, most of the kids don't at this phase in our life. VBS is still an attractional opportunity for the church to reach out and draw people into the love of Christ. There's a very short story that I'm going to share with you to end today from the scriptures about the attractional nature of Jesus and his ministry. He was in the city of Jericho, famous city. You've all probably sung songs about the city of Jericho at some point in time in their life. And there was a man that lived there named Zacchaeus, another person that many of you have probably sung songs about, that wanted to see Jesus. And here's the thing. We know some things about Zacchaeus. Why would he want to see Jesus? We don't know. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. He wasn't just a tax collector. He was a chief tax collector. In other words, he was over the other tax collectors, which means he was hated, he was a liar, he was a thief, he was a crook, and worst of all, he was a traitor to his own people. He'd sold out to the Roman government. Why would he want to see Jesus? There's a whole variety of reasons. When you study the Gospels in the chronological order, the best that they can be put together, then you find that on Jesus' way into Jericho, he had just healed a man that had been born blind, a blind man right there at the city gates. Maybe that was what drew Zacchaeus in. It is likely, according to the chronological order, that maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks prior to that, Jesus had resurrected Lazarus from the dead after being dead for 4 days. Maybe that got to Zacchaeus and he wanted to hear. But let's also remember that Zacchaeus was a corrupt traitor thief. After Jesus raised Zacchaeus from the dead, the chief priest said, hey, we got to get rid of this Jesus guy. If anybody sees him, let him know. In other words, there was a price on Jesus' head. Maybe Zacchaeus climbed the tree so he could get a good look at the guy that he wanted to take out to inherit all that money from the chief priest. We don't have any idea why Zacchaeus was pursuing Jesus and what he wanted to get out of that opportunity. But we know the result, the end game. Jesus was attractional. And so whether people sought to see him for good reasons or bad reasons, Jesus could change the hearts and minds of whoever were brought to him. And in this very short story, and there was no pun intended if you know the story of Zacchaeus, you'll hear it. Chapter 19, verse 1 of the Gospel of Luke. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because of his height, he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached that spot, he looked up at him. Zacchaeus, you come down. Anyway, that's what the song says. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he, Jesus, has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look here, Lord. Here now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay it back 4 times the amount. In verse 9, Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. Verse 10, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Now, did you know that was Zacchaeus that he was referring? Did you know that Jesus' mission statement was found in this very short story of a sinful tax collector who we don't know why he came to see Jesus, but Jesus tells him why he came to see him. We don't know Zacchaeus' motivation, but we know Jesus' mission to seek and save the lost. We don't know why kids might be here this next week, why they're going to hear the stories of Matthew, of Mary Magdalene, and of Paul. We don't know. But we do know that we get to show them the love of Jesus and the truth of his word. Zacchaeus, he just wanted to see Jesus. Jesus wanted to transform Zacchaeus completely into a man of God, a man willing to repent of his mistakes, a man willing to live a new life, a man willing to even go so far as to make amends to every single person that he'd robbed, cheated, and stealed from in the course of his very lucrative profession. Yeah. Parents might be sending their kids for us to be a babysitter for 2 hours. Okay. I'm just fine with that. Maybe just to get their children out of the house because they've been home since March. That's just fine with us. How will we receive them? Parents might also be sending their kids on a mission. Who are those people over at Berea? How will they treat my kids? How will they see us when we drop them off? Will they welcome in our kids? Will they love our kids, whoever they may be? Can we trust them? What are they teaching over there? Zacchaeus, when he climbed that tree to try to get to see Jesus, he had to know in his mind, not his heart, but he had to know in his mind that there was no way that Jesus could ever possibly love him or accept him or want him to do with anything that Jesus was about, right? So what did Jesus do? Jesus looked at him and said, hey, I'm coming to your house. He invited himself over. And was that rude? No, not really. Not really. Here's the thing. He invited himself over to dinner so that he could change Zacchaeus' life forever. And church, here's what I want to tell you. That is exactly what we want Jesus to do this week. We want Jesus to have the opportunity to change even just one kid's life forever. That's why we do what we do. There is no way to know what the impact will be on the kids that come this week, but let's go beyond that. There's no way to know what the impact on the families of these kids could be as a result of this week. Let's take it another step further. There's no way to know what the impact on the lives of the volunteers will be this week, and there's no way to know or measure the impact on the community around us or even across the globe, because you don't know how Jesus might use one of the people associated with this week to go and spread the gospel in even another location. Has God began that work in you? Are you excited about doing the work of Christ, serving in his kingdom, loving kids this next week, or the adults at your work, or the coworkers, or your neighbors, your community? Are you excited about that? Has he began that work in you? I pray that he has. I pray that he has. And Jesus is just as attractional today. Jesus brought you here this morning for a reason. And he wants you to respond to that reason. I've asked to kind of an odd invitation time today. As a part of that, we always want to open those doors to anybody that needs prayer in their lives. There are people going through things in life right now. And one of the worst things that happens so often in Christians' lives is we internalize it. And we think, well, that's just between me and God, and we'll just work through it together. And that's not what God designed this place for. He designed us to be here for each other as we go through these things. He is there for you, absolutely. But he gave you brothers and sisters in Christ to walk with you through whatever your life is facing. He always wants us, every time we gather, to offer that opportunity to accept Christ for the very first time, to recommit yourself to Christ. If you kind of strayed away, kind of wandered away, and kind of just forgotten about, disowned even him, he hasn't left you. And he would love to welcome you right back into his arms right now. And the third thing we want to do today is simply this. If you are volunteering this next week at VBS, we're not going to have you come front and gather together. We know that's frowned upon in the times that we live in. So we're just going to ask that you stand here in just a second if you're volunteering this next week. And Don Timberman, one of our elders, has agreed to come up and pray over you. And so if you could unmute one of these mics and just tell me which one it is, I will give that to Don. Doesn't matter? Okay, I'll just grab this one then. Easier said than done, and I will turn it on for him. And so if you are volunteering this VBS in any capacity, if you could please stand right now, and we're just going to ask that Don pray over you.
I like the words that Chris used this morning. He came to seek and save the lost. That would be our hearts. It should be our hearts as God's children. And as we endeavor to lift up Christ, to bring glory to him, when we lift him up, all those around us will be lifted up. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget our goal, to be planting seeds, to be ever about the Lord's business. This week is an intense week for a lot of people. It's a good week, and you go through a little bit of VBS, you find that out. It is a good week, but it's stressful. Let's not forget who we're serving. Those who come in those doors are the ones we're looking out for. We are to give them hope. You don't know who's coming through that door, brothers and sisters. You have no idea what they live in, how their lives are, their moms and dads. Let's be Christ to those people, okay? Father, I thank you for today. Thank you for VBS. Thank you for the people that volunteer. Thank you for our volunteers, Lord, and may their hearts be totally into what they're doing this week. May you speak into their lives. And I ask, Lord, that our congregation, that they would lift up these volunteers. They would lift up the children. They would lift up this building. They would be praying earnestly every day, 2 or 3 times a day, Lord, for the things that will happen through VBS. And like Brother Chris has pointed out, there will be lives we touch we have no understanding. We have no idea of the depth of Christ and what he can do with people's lives. We just thank you for today and all those volunteering. And Lord, I ask you to bless them, their families, and everything they do this week. And may they, more than anything, Lord, stay in your word. Stay in your word each and every day, as well as serving here, Lord, that we would walk in the way that you would have us walk. May we bring honor and glory to your name, Christ. I ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you all.
And as the worship team comes forward, one other thing I just want to mention. This is the most, well, by far and away, the strangest year for VBS ever with everything happening around us. And so if you're not currently signed up to help, here's what I would ask. Be available. Just if you can, if your schedule allows it at all, just be available. If God moves in some crazy way, he's always going to provide what we need. And we know that. And he just might need you. So just be available. If you get this message, an email or a Facebook post on Monday night, Tuesday morning, hey, God did some crazy things last night. We had this walk-up that was completely not planned for, but just unexpected because of the way registration is working right now. Just be ready to maybe step in and help those last 3 days. Okay, just be praying about that because who knows what God might do. Thank you.